So now we're going to consider some more examples of things that can happen to people who do discounting in the new behavioral approach, deviating from Homo economicus. And the example that we're going to consider now will be procrastination. Maybe you know procrastination means there's a job, a bit annoying job. You should do it right now. Would be best if you did it right now, but you keep on postponing because you're lazy. You rather do other things, and only bigger trouble come from it. That is procrastination. Here are people who wrote many papers on this topic. We're going to use the crazy hyperbolic discounting to analyze the model. So we're going to assume that kind of discounting, and you will remember, of course, as always, the present has weight 1. In the future, you have the usual constant discounted factor that is here, but as an exa beta, the future is punished exa by a number beta between 0 and 1. So that's the model. And you remember it's a simple model, so we use it in the example. We're going to assume that you have to write a report within the next 4 weeks. And that's a deadline. You really have to do it, no escape. We're going to assume in this discount model that the delta, the classical discount factor, is in fact 1. So in that sense, there is no discounting. And for a short period of 4 weeks, that's a reasonable assumption. So only beta, the new behavioral parameter about presence effect, how the future is punished relative to the presence, that's the only thing that we're going to play around with, and we're going to assume that that is the only thing that is effective here. So immediate cost, because you have to do the work, the reward will only come later. Now, usually on Saturday evening, you go to a cinema, and the schedule for the coming weeks, the first week there will be a mediocre movie that you will see, then a good movie, then a great movie, and finally the best movie. This is what is in the future coming. However, because you have to write a report, you have to skip one of these movies. On one Saturday evening, you have to work on your report, and you have to. Your decision is when will you do it. So, which movie will you lose because of it? The value, let us quantify. Here are the values of the seeing the movies. The last week was the best, I told you. It had biggest value 13. The first week, mediocre, was the smallest value, only 3. Those are utilities. And I already told you the report just has to be written. You cannot escape. And the value comes after weeks, 4 weeks, and it's a fixed value anyhow. So it plays no role in this analysis. First, we consider what happens to a stationary person, so this Homo economicus rational person. That means beta equal 1. There's no presence effect. The future is not weighted less than the present. And it's quite trivial, but I still do it to get into it. If the person must decide right now this week, it decides to immediately do it because the loss is the smallest then. If for whatever reason the person cannot do it this week, it must decide next week, will again decide I do it immediately. That is the smallest loss. Also, if the week after does it immediately, the person always does it as soon as possible because the sooner, the smaller the damage. This is a sort of trivial case, but it's also the best case possible, of course. Now we're going to see naive person. So we're going to assume this person does have this present effect, beta equal half. The person is violating stationarity. Now you know that can be naive or sophisticated. Now we're going to assume it's in a naive manner. This person is sort of double dumb. First is beta not being equal 1, the second handling it in a naive manner. And you'll see what horrible things will happen to this person. First, let us look at the perspective of this week. The person says, if I do it this week, I lose 3. I lose the whole movie, and it feels in full force. The discounting at present is weight 1. If I do it next week, well, 5, but he feels only half of it because beta is equal half. The future is punished by factor half. So feels only 2.5 loss. Here, again, by half, it's a 4 loss, 6.5 loss. So the person is looking at these numbers and says, I better do it next week. Then I feel that loss feels smaller than the loss right now. So I'm going to do it next week. That is how it will happen. This person is naive, does not know, does not realize that next week he may behave differently than what he wants now. And let us look into it. Let us see when next week arrives. Then the person is thinking, if I do it now, I lose 5, because that is the present for him now. So no discounting. And all the others are discounted by factor 2. So he says, I should not do it now. Then I lose 5. I better postpone a week. And I lose only 4. So he says, I'm going to do it next week. And that is what will happen. Again, he's naive. He doesn't know that if next come, he may behave differently. Let us look into it. What happens if he is in that penultimate week? If he doesn't immediately, he says, oh, he feels loss 8, because that is the present at the moment. Next week, the 0.5 factor comes in, 6.5. So at that moment, he says, I better do it next week. That loss feels smaller than doing it right now. So you see, a naive person each week is postponing, not understanding how he will behave in the future, suffering much from it. Does it only in the last week? That's the worst possible. The best movie possible is lost. So this is the bad fate of a naive person, suffering much from the irrational. Now we look at the sophisticated person. It's again, this person also will assume beta equal half. So this person has that presence effect of underweighting the whole future, so to say, but it treats in a wiser manner, it's sophisticated. This person knows that in the future he may behave according to that model. So let us analyze that person. Now let us start the penultimate week, the last time of decision. What would happen then? Then the person says, if I do it right now, I feel a loss of 8. Doing it next week feels like a loss of 6.5 because your beta hits in. So I'm gonna postpone till next week. Now let us look at the perspective of, from here, the second, next week. Then the person says, if I do it right now, I lose 5 because he feels that's the present right now. But this person knows if I postpone it till next week, the person knows that this will happen. It means, in fact, I postpone it till the last week. I will never do it that week. I will do it in the last week then. So he knows that that will be 6.5. He knows that these are the only options available to him. So he says, I better do it right now because that's far away, factor half, but still it's worse. Smallest loss, I'll do it right now. Finally, let us look at the beginning, the first week. What is the perspective then? The person then reasons, if I do it now, I feel a loss of 3. That's not so nice. If I postpone till next week, I know myself. I know that I will then do it next week. So then I'll have that loss of 5, but futures, the bet is half hits in. So it's felt as only lost 2.5. So he says then, I'll do it next week. So here we see the final conclusion. The sophisticated person will do it next week. That's a bit, it would be better to do it this week, but it's not so very bad. So we conclude, the stationary person does it in the best way, sophisticated does it quite good, and the naive does it in the worst way possible. So here again, sophisticated is better than naive, is mostly but not always the case, as I said before. In general, time inconsistency, there are many situations also in society where time inconsistency play a role. People want to stop smoking, but each time they feel the joy of the cigarette right now, they feel it much stronger than the future benefit for health. Or people want to save money for later, but they have no self-control. They spend it all right now and they don't have enough for pension. Many things of that kind are going on, and many mechanisms in society to work against it. Well, one little example of, I told before about this case of a person getting up in the morning and alarm and self-control problems there. There are companies that make alarms, especially for the case. So here's an alarm. If you try to touch it, it will start running. So you have to go after it. So you're laying in your bed and getting it quiet is not possible. So it's a bit funny, but it's a good means to make people get out of the bed, the naive people at least. So there are many industries building on that phenomenon. But we go on to the next topic, and that is more fundamental violations of the classical model. That will be in the next recording.